This is the meeting of the District Operations Committee for the 20th of December. Can I get a roll call, please?
Yes, good morning. Director Matt Sampson.
Here.
Director Jed Smith.
Here.
Vice Chair Ranjiv Kush.
Here.
And Chair Larry Russell.
Here. I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Director Sampson.
Yes.
Director Smith.
Here. Aye.
Vice Chair Kush.
Aye.
And Chair Russell.
Aye.
Thank you.
Public comment on non-agenda items.
There are none.
Okay. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the Operations Committee from November 15, 2024.
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Director Sampson.
Yes.
Director Smith.
Yes.
Vice Chair Kush.
Aye.
Chair Russell.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, item B, review and refer two professional service agreements for geotechnical and civil design engineering services.
Good morning, Chair Russell, directors. I'm engineering director here this morning with Zach Talbot, our engineering manager, who will be presenting the on-call service contract item. And this is all in support of the district's capital improvement program and as well as aligning with the district's 5-year strategic plan. So go ahead, Zach.
Thanks, Alex. Good morning, directors.
Good morning.
Good morning. As part of the district's increasing capital improvement program and aligning with our 5-year strategic plan, Goal 2, Resilient Water Systems, specifically Objective 3, Capital Project Delivery, staff is looking to obtain on-call and as-needed professional service agreements from 2 geotechnical and civil design engineering firms. These services will support vital projects such as landslide repairs, retaining wall design, and site design for pump stations and water storage tanks projects. Every winter, intense rainfall can trigger landslide events that can pose serious risks to the district's infrastructure, especially to the miles of pipelines within the watershed. When these events occur near our critical assets, staff must act quickly in order to repair the damage. Geotechnical engineering services, including soil testing and the creation of geotechnical reports, are a key part of this process and often occurs right away. These reports will help guide the civil design work and help staff ensure the safety and stability of these repairs. In addition to landslide repairs, staff will continue to undertake the rehabilitation projects for our pump stations and our tank sites. Many of these projects require detailed geotechnical studies to assess factors such as foundation design, soil stability, and the need for soil nail walls or retaining walls. Having the right experts on hand to provide these services will allow staff to maintain a streamlined and timely approach to project design and construction delivery. Staff is currently conducting a competitive solicitation process for the selection of 2 qualified consultants who will enter into separate service agreements. Each contract will have a not to exceed limit of $600,000 for a total of $1.2 million. These agreements will provide a multi-year and flexible solution for our engineering needs and will extend through the year 2028 with an additional year if needed. This proactive approach of on-call services will enable staff to better manage the risk posed by rain events while ensuring timely completion of critical projects to maintain the reliability of our water system to the communities that we serve. The recommended action is for review and referral to a future regularly scheduled board meeting of directors with the Operations Committee recommendation to award 2 separate contracts. Thank you.
We'll take any questions.
I can start off. That's okay. Sure. Zach, thank you for that. Any estimate on what percentage the money would be used for a response to, say, a landslide as opposed to supporting a capital infrastructure project that we're planning?
That's a good question. It really depends on the year and the condition out there. It's hard to tell. Sometimes there's one project which could be maybe $100,000 worth of design work, but maybe we have 3 or 4 projects. In fact, Alex, I think, was part of a year in 2017.
Yeah, 2017, we had 17 landslides throughout our watershed. So that was a kind of a abnormally busy year for landslide repairs. But in the past couple of years since that, it hasn't been that intensive. So it really does depend on conditions and atmospheric river events that come in through our watershed. So it just really does depend.
Gotcha. So we can start supercharging some of the infrastructure projects should this money not be needed for the on-call.
Yeah, and it's
Whatever.
as
Okay.
needed, so it's not going to be encumbered. It's just as projects develop, it'll get charged against the project. So
Great, thank you.
yes.
Was it?
What
Sounds
exactly do they do when you call them?
In the bill.
I mean, yeah, I guess my point, it's two contracts for $600,000 each. So
Correct.
$1.2 million over a number of years.
Correct.
4
So
years. So you could hire 4 people for those 4 years for that amount of money.
that's true, but geotechnical expertise is something that's not really typically done in-house, and it does require a specific license and expertise and equipment to actually do that work. So it's important to get, somebody on call. So when that emergency does happen, we're quicker to respond. So otherwise, the typical practice is getting a professional service agreement in place, and that takes time and really kind of bogs down the process to respond and start
And
mitigating.
what's the equipment that they bring in, or it must
The-
be pretty heavy? Yeah.
Soil boring equipment. So you kind of wait for it to dry out a little bit and you do soil borings because usually when you want to do a structured repair,
Yep.
you want to tie into your bedrock.
Got it.
And so you don't know where the bedrock is until you do soil borings. And so you'll kind of figure out, okay, this is how long your wall is going to be and where you're going to tie in.
So it's more than just labor. I mean, they're bringing
Yeah,
in
Oh,
pretty
it's really
significant-
that and also taking back samples back to the laboratory, running different analysis to make sure cohesive strains, and then, what it's made out of, so you know how
And
to
have we
mitigate.
used this kind of service in the past?
Oh, yes,
Okay, so this is just kind of ongoing normal practice.
correct.
And maybe just to follow on Jed's question, we only spend the money if it's needed in this case.
that
right?
is correct.
So if we don't need it, we use it for other things as
So
Matt suggested.
Overall, this is part of the strategy we've been doing of bringing contracts that will have in place on call that allow us to respond quicker, kind of reduce the level of bureaucracy on each and every need to bring in a contract. So, right, we've done that for electrical recently and mechanical. So we have these contracts only really as needed,
Mhm.
but they're there and ready to go when we do need them.
Do they charge any sort of retainer fee in the absence of, okay.
No, only as needed. And the reason for two is because sometimes depending on the nature of the damage, that one consultant may be busy, so having two allows that flexibility to make sure we reliably get one or the other if needed.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
The year with the 17 landslides, mostly on our land?
Correct. Yeah, mostly 5 of those were on our land, 2 of them were on Marin County open space where we had our transmission line. So there was a coordinated effort there as well.
But not private property.
No, not private property.
And how do we enforce them not bidding on both contracts? What keeps them from bidding on both?
You
I
mean
know
like
it-
one
it
firm
probably
would
has
do?
language that says you can only bid on one or the other, but I mean, how do you really enforce that?
No, so it's just one bid process and we'll select 2
Oh,
from
I
that
see.
process.
Yes,
I see. So everybody bids on
Yes.
everything.
The same one, yes, the same scope of work or
I see.
SOQs came out. Yeah,
Sorry, I didn't realize that. That's a good way to do it. That way you don't get into the fight.
yes.
Any questions from the public?
There are none.
Okay, I need a motion to refer this to the board.
So moved.
Yeah, second.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
see you soon, Zach. Above ground infrastructure hardening assessment. Hi, Alicia.
Morning, directors. Alicia Irish, Engineering Manager and Planning. Today, we're here to talk to you about our above-ground infrastructure hardening condition assessment. This exercise turned out to be extremely beneficial. So thank you, Director Sampson, for encouraging us to do this. The intent is that this is part of a suite of assessments that we'll be completing over the next year to develop our long-term CIP plan. And as we went through this exercise, we discovered that there is a range of issues, some of which can be readily addressed and have been, and that's already strengthened our resiliency. And then there are other long-term actions that will be included in future short and long-term CIP plans. And to kind of go further into the condition assessment, I want to introduce Brian Verba. He's an assistant engineer in the planning group, and he's going to be taking us through this exercise.
Good morning, directors.
Morning.
And then just click to go. Good morning. My name is Brian Verba, Assistant Engineer in Planning. Today, I will be presenting the results from our above-ground infrastructure hardening assessment. Today, we will cover the various assets that were included in the above-ground infrastructure hardening assessment, and our agenda also covers what a defensible space is, discusses ongoing activities, and presents next steps. This work is in alignment with the district's 5-year strategic plan, specifically Objective 1E, Goal 2 of the Resilient Water System objectives. By identifying above-ground infrastructure hardening needs and taking a look at our assets through the lens of a fire hardening perspective. These are one of several assessments that are intended to feed into a longer-term CIP discussion. This condition assessment performed defensible space evaluations at pump stations, ranger residences, the Sky Oaks Ranger Station, and the Lagunitas Spillway. This work was done in coordination with MWPA, the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. And the initial partnership allowed us to create a framework to complete the evaluations in a consistent and technical manner. What is a defensible space? A defensible space, as defined by CAL FIRE and the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, is the area that extends outward from a structure on all sides to a distance of 100 feet or the nearest property line, whichever is closest. A well-established defensible space provides fire crews with a safe area to operate in the event of a wildfire and reduces fire fuel loads in the area surrounding a structure. Defensible space is subdivided into 3 zones. Zone 0 extends 0 to 5 feet and is considered the most critical because it is closest to the asset. Zone 1 extends 5 to 30 feet from the asset, and Zone 2 extends 30 feet to 100 feet or the nearest property line. Each evaluation was performed by using a top, down, and out approach. For example, the evaluator will start at the top, beginning the assessment at the roof of the structure, then proceeding down to inspect each side of the structure, and finishing out with the defensible space evaluations. On the next slides, we will discuss the typical observations for each asset class, beginning with pump stations. The items presented here illustrate the typical defensible space observations found at some of the pump stations. Some of these actions are considered regular ongoing maintenance activities that are currently in progress or have been completed, whereas others are considered longer-term capital improvements that will feed into both the short and long-term CIP plans. Larger CIP projects are needed to address some of the observations made during the condition assessments. To maximize the resiliency of these structures, district criteria takes into account structure hardening practices, such as the use of non-combustible materials for siding and roofs, as well as installing appropriate vents and screens during the design process. The figure on the left shows the Hine Pump Station installed in 1955, which is a typical structure from this time period. The figure on the right, the Conifer Upper Pump Station, is one of our newer pump stations, installed 5 years ago and incorporates the latest best practices. We also looked at the Sky Oaks Ranger Station. In general, the Sky Oaks Ranger Station is in good condition from a wildfire hardening perspective, in large part due to the ongoing maintenance activities such as the well-managed grasses, brake lines, and the minimal presence of ladder fuels and debris piles. However, there are some longer-term activities that should be considered in the upcoming CIP plan, such as replacing the siding and roofs with non-combustible materials and ensuring that all openings are less than or equal to 1/8 of an inch. We took a similar approach when looking at the Lagunitas Spillway. The Lagunitas Spillway is the only wooden spillway in the district and is in relatively good condition. The same framework was used to evaluate the conditions in the various defensible space zones, and many of these observations have already been addressed. These actions improve the resiliency to wildfire and are incorporated into regular and ongoing maintenance activities. Finally, we looked at the 6 ranger residences. Using similar efforts as was done for the previous assets, the same top-down and out approach was applied for the ranger residences. The defensible space around each structure is in good condition in large part due to the ongoing maintenance activities, such as, staff observed some actions that will be incorporated into the long-term CIP plan, such as replacement of combustible materials with non-combustible and the installation of hardscape around the structures. The remaining 3 structures, which are currently unoccupied, have similar observations. Should these become occupied at a later date, staff would ensure these unoccupied structures will have a maintenance program in place similar to the current structures. Finally, we will discuss the ongoing activities and the next steps. Many of the current best practices are already carried out by the district with its fuels mitigation program at regular intervals and is considered ongoing maintenance activities. Some of the larger actions, such as replacing siding or roof, may be addressed by district staff through a maintenance activity, or if too large, may be incorporated into the CIP program. In terms of next steps, staff will continue the refinement of maintenance practices with a focus on wildfire prevention. We will also be incorporating the information on structures into the upcoming and long-term CIP planning process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brian. Questions?
Sure. I don't mind going again. Alicia, I appreciate the acknowledgement, but the thanks really goes to you and your team for getting this done. And I'm very happy to hear that it was a beneficial exercise and provided a lot of low-hanging fruit that we can attack right away, especially around all this critical infrastructure in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by fuel. So I'm very glad to see that. And also thank you for partnering with Marin Wildfire to get the subject matter expert component brought in on that. And I encourage those who haven't seen the IBHS or Institute for Business and Home Safety, the insurance industry's research arm, to look at what Zone Zero can do for a structure. And they burn home after home after home with structures that are up to their standard and not. And it's actually the same framework that the insurance commissioner is putting out for the state of California, the Safer from Wildfire framework. So we're following that, which is great. How is this data being tracked now? Do we use Marin Wildfire software to evaluate each structure and then we get a report, or
We haven't been using their software. We've been collecting this data internally and essentially starting a database. The actions that are going to be placed into the longer term CIP plan will be also incorporated into our more comprehensive pump station assessment that we'll be completing this year. And that assessment will take into account not only the fire hardening, but also the actual pumps and motors, the electrical and communications equipment, and we'll be feeding all of that together to really form a pump station rehabilitation program within our long-term CIP.
Great, great. And then coming away with this data, is there a plan now for the annual maintenance in terms of removing vegetation, things like that built into it?
Yeah, so that ongoing maintenance program has been established, but we have been feeding some of our notes that we found as like anomalous to our watershed staff or to our operations crews that perform these ongoing maintenance activities, so they can add those work orders that will regularly come up at a regular interval.
Great, that's good. One structure I didn't see up there was a log cabin at Phoenix Lake. I'm not sure that one's defensible, but joking aside, thank you very much for this. This is a really big deal for me, and I think it's going to provide a measurable benefit right away. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Brian. Great update. Thank you, Alicia. Is there any coordination with PG&E? I know they're doing a lot of analysis of tree cover surrounding their power lines. Do we work with them to manage that on the watershed?
To my understanding, we're not working in lockstep with them for the power lines along the watershed. This exercise was solely focused on the district structures, but that would be something to kind of consider later on.
Or they may be also looking at that independently.
Mm-hmm.
Sean's not here, but I am aware that they've had recently a program replacing a number of lines across the watershed. They come in with helicopters and that sort of thing, get a permit and coordinate with our staff that work. We'll take a look. It is an interesting question on the state of that effort and how robust we think the condition of their infrastructure is across our watershed.
All you gotta do is watch the TV. They're telling us how cool, right?
Right.
PG&E is all over the place.
And their helicopters sometimes can be, a little bit intense when they're mapping the lines. They just
Yeah.
spend so much time.
Yeah. Well, they fly them all. So they do more than map. They
Mm, mm.
physically observe. Yeah. Did, I was interested in your comment about 1/8 of an inch. What I understand from listening to NPR on the Santa Rosa fires is that the majority of the houses burned down because of the roof vents. And I can't find anything about 1/8 of an inch anywhere. There are two brands that I see, Vulcan and
Starts with the B, possibly.
yes, Broadbent or something like that.
Yes, I saw both of
Vanguard.
those. Yeah, Brandguard's the other event that I also saw as well. That criteria, MWPA informed us of that criteria. And I also saw it around a lot of our events. One of the slides shows actually a vent that is, there's two sets of screen on it, neither of which satisfies that 1/8 inch criteria. But that said, it can be easily replaced with, per MWPA, an 1/8 inch galvanized wire mesh that you receive from a local hardware store.
One of the things is, where this is going from is the California Building Code, Chapter 7A, which was really born out of the Oakland Hills fire, and it's an ember resistant construction. And so they recommended at first 1/8, and it went to 1/16 for the vent coverings for the roof vents as well. But with 1/16, they weren't getting the airflow they were getting, so they're getting mold issues inside homes. So 1/8 is or one of the vents that you were right.
Yeah, because these other ones have got like guards, they're offset guards like this, so that there's no straight path.
No, they also, some are designed to close and heat.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah, it's pretty interesting technology coming out of it.
Well, I think the observation is interesting, huh? That there's so many houses burned down in Santa Rosa because of exactly that, burned from the roof down.
Mhm.
And it's one area, like you think you have a stucco house, you're pretty independent. but
All it
not
takes
so
is
much.
one vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, especially when they can't fight the fire. So that's always interesting. Okay, well, as long as we have a plan, I think we can always do a little more on this. One thing I noticed that in the pump station, it had an underground power service. Is that true most of the time? The picture you showed on the side of the 55 one?
That I would say depends. I think the pump stations you might be referring to are either Hind or the Smith Conifer
I'm
pumps.
just showing the picture you had there. It had underground service.
I'd say that generally depends on where the pump station is located.
Because
That
it seems to me
varies.
that's pretty vulnerable, that overhead drop, like most houses have.
You
Um,
you do see that, and that could be.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of going off the top of my head here. I would say about over half don't have the underground service drop. And that's something that we can look at as we approach each pump station individually for its rehabilitation project. That's also something that requires further coordination with
Of
PG&E.
course,
So we would have to look on that on a case-by-case basis and see how feasible that really is.
yeah, well, it's expensive, huh? It's interesting. My house was built in 65 and my neighbors are the Mosleys. And they developed the land. it's interesting that they undergrounded us. It's also interesting that last Saturday, our power was taken out by a tree that fell on Paradise, very near where my daughter lives. And they were able, it's actually funny, they were able to restore our power, but they didn't restore hers. I don't quite understand what happened there, but because hers is physically adjacent, I mean, behind this towards the bay. And besides the aesthetics, which are substantial, it's interesting that, they were willing to put the money into that development to underground it in 65. And of course, coming down Paradise, we have the incoming power on poles. So, I think that, I know we've talked and kicked tires a little bit about going the PG&E wires across the watershed. I think that, it's millions, but I think it still would be a very good investment to consider undergrounding all of those. I know we're talking, and I suppose we're at PG&E's mercy, we have to pay for it, but when they could get to it, because I still think it's something that would provide substantial resilience in the event of unforeseen events.
Yeah, we'd have to, my understanding is the nature of the canyons would make that a brutal project, and their focus is upgrading the poles.
Low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
It's interesting that many places I work in, consult in, have concrete poles to get around exactly this problem. It's an interesting thing philosophically. I think it's a terrible decision was made by the power companies to follow the telephone and telegraph. They basically just took the easy route out, even to the point of bare wires. It's like, really? How much would it cost to insulate the wires? But they didn't do that. And so anywhere we can back into that, especially, I don't think people realize, I'm guessing feeding us is probably at least 4,100 volts, could be higher on those. They don't realize how much juice is in those poles that run down the street right in front of your house. But it is a substantial potential problem. Fortunately, in the rain, there was no fires from the event that occurred on Saturday. Although we left Paradise Cay and went to Moraga to get heat. We have a generator, but I didn't want to fire the generator off. It's a little noisy for the neighbors. So, anyway, well, public comment.
There are none.
Okay, great. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Brian.
Thank you.
Alicia. Okay, water supply update. Let it rain.
I think we can accommodate that.
I think you are accommodating it.
Yes.
I would still appreciate that weather report in your manager's report for the board meetings. I think it's useful.
Okay, good morning, Paul Sellier, Water Resources Director. I'm joined by Lucy Croy, our Water Quality Manager, who will be presenting the water supply update today.
131%, pretty good.
Not bad.
I'm not.
How many years do we have that kind of thing? Because I don't remember very many.
It's funny when you look back the last couple, we'll see in the charts, when you look back at the last couple of years, 22, 23 was a really wet year with
Yes.
like 74 inches of rain. And
Yes.
so the recent history has been pretty good in the last 5 years or so. 3 out of 5 has been very, very wet. But, we spilled on average 54% of the time. So that gives you an idea. So that's since the Kent raise in 80.
Across the board?
Yeah. Okay, take it away, Lucy.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You hear
Liz.
me? Yeah, live. Good morning, Board of Directors, water supply update. I don't know if I'm giving it all away, but it's good news this morning, as you probably can expect. So we'll start off with an update on water supply conditions, look at a little bit of water use as we go into kind of the end of December, and then forecast, which fortunately is somewhat boring at this point in summary. So we are the orange line over here on the left-hand side. And started off actually pretty wet this November. We had about 13 inches in that cyclone atmospheric river. So
Although before that, it was pretty dry.
it was pretty dry in October, as you can see. In the coming out of that drought 2 or 3 years ago, we did have more rain a couple years ago, but we've had 2 wet winters the past 2 years, and then have stayed wet this winter so far. So we're at 22 inches so far this water year, which is 150% of average. So looking back in our historical record, so starting off pretty strong. Playing with all the, did I go too far?
Yeah, 1, 2, 4.
Having all the technical difficulties today. And then looking at our reservoir storage, with the 2 wet winters that we had the last 2 years, we started off with really high reservoir storage, and with the rainfall, are now actually at the highest we've ever been for this time of year. So in December, we're up at around 75,000 acre feet, and Kent is the only reservoir that's not spilling currently. And we expect with a little bit of rainfall, we will be spilling all of our reservoirs very soon. So all good conditions going ahead.
And the spilling offset the releases. Yes.
It does. Once right now Sewell-Hooley is spilling, so that offsets there. And we expect that as soon as Kent starts spilling, that'll offset that release. But even with the runoff we're receiving from the watershed downstream, it does help quite a bit. So we haven't needed to release nearly as much as we typically would if it were drier. So
And are we seeing a benefit from the new stream gauge system at all?
we've been testing, it's been running in automation at times and testing as we've had some power outages at times and watching it and monitoring, but we are watching to see how the automation runs compared to how we would manually run it. And generally it's done a very good job monitoring the system every 3 hours and making adjustments as needed. So turning down the releases maybe in the middle of the night when rain hits, where we wouldn't necessarily have someone manually monitoring it. So that's one of the adjustments we have been watching so far.
Great, that's good to hear. Thank you.
So inputs to the folks across the street?
Yes, it runs through SCADA. Yes.
And then, but the valve changes automatically?
Yes. Yes.
Well, that's
But
interesting.
this point you made, Larry, I didn't realize that when we have spills or substantial runoff in the watershed, it offsets our required releases.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Makes sense.
they're not releases, but they're stream flow.
Right,
So
right.
however you get there, you
Yeah.
get there.
Hmm,
Yeah,
there's-
That's
there's-
why I brought it up.
There's requirements down at Samuel P. Taylor, which
Mhm.
is about 3 miles downstream from Kent. And so we're required to meet those stream flows down there. How we get there, whether it's runoff from the watershed or from Kent, we just need to make sure that it's met at that point.
Are we worse off on temperature or better during spill?
It depends on the time of year. We're always releasing from the lowest part of Kent Lake.
Except when we're spilling.
Right. But yes, so when we release from the lowest, coldest part. So we do our best to meet the temperature requirements.
Right, but I'm asking what happens when it's spilling?
It's typically in the summer where we're challenged on temperatures.
Okay, so it's cold enough.
Yeah.
For our partners up north, Sonoma Water, as you can expect, they've also had a good boost in storage as well for Lake Sonoma and Lake Mendocino. You may have read that Santa Rosa hit a really historical rainfall during the atmospheric river. And so you can see that both have boosted very high above their flood control. These images were taken December 16th, it looks like. And so this will drop down as they release water from their flood control pool. But they're doing well as just like us as well.
We're looking at the black lines here for the storage level in the relative reservoirs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. This year's well ahead, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I think we started off ahead and have gained quite a bit of rainfall and storage early on. So
As my flight instructor likes to say, if you have a choice between being good or lucky, take lucky.
in addition, I would say that demand, coming out of 2020, it has stayed low. We do see a little bit of a rebound. We saw more of a rebound in October. The we're looking at this bluer line over here. So this is October 2024. So there's a little bit of a rebound in October. In November, of course, we had a bigger rainfall, probably irrigation was shut off. So this is about a 2 or 3% increase from last year. But generally speaking, over this period from January through November compared to last year, we're seeing about a 2 to 3% increase in demand and production, which is in line with what Brett has presented in the finance presentations.
Yeah, I've always loved that part that rain has a twofold purpose here, filling the reservoirs, but also reducing the irrigation needs. So it's kind of interesting how those two walk hand in hand. We benefit twice.
Just on demand, Larry, I was interested in a comment you made a couple of meetings ago about how much demand has declined over your tenure.
Yeah.
And you suggested that it was up in the 30,000 acre feet.
35, I think, 33 at least. When Dana was here, I remember that presentation at one of the retreats. It was, do you remember 33 or 35? At least 33.
33,000 acre feet was the projected demand. Yeah.
And right now we're averaging around 20 to 20,500 acre feet per year.
Yeah, you can just think about that, forgetting about the environmental and those issues, think about it from the finance side. It makes it tricky.
So taking the current storage levels and looking ahead, what does this mean? We're looking at good conditions. The green line at the top, that's a little bit hard to see. That's average rainfall, and with this continued low demand that we're seeing. So we're expecting to spill very soon. And with average rainfall, storage levels would stay very high. We're using a pretty severe bookend for the two lower lines just to see what it would take to even drop storage levels. So this is a 50% rainfall scenario. If we really didn't have any more rain the rest of the year, how low would we get? And you can see that we still stay significantly above our water shortage contingency triggers. So in general, we're in a very good position going into the rest of this winter and the summer months at this point.
Might add too, that several years ago, I had concerns about those triggers. And we did a big evaluation of them, and they're spot on. Now, how they arrived at them, I have no idea. There's the 40,000 acre feet in April 1st, and but they're good and they work. And I could find nobody else that knew the answer either, where they came from.
So looking ahead, we last year we joined the Center for Western Water and Western Weather and Water Excellence Group through the Scripps down at UC San Diego, and have been receiving updates as it gets wetter. They actually send updates every 2 days or so, and I have a few examples coming up of some of the updates that we've been receiving. So this is an update that shows they call it a family of atmospheric rivers that are incoming, because there's 5 atmospheric rivers.
Is the new radar running?
The new radar.
No,
Do you know?
Mount
Not yet, huh?
Barnaby radar is not yet up yet, but it's coming.
And the working group that we're a part of now, it's helpful because they take many of the atmospheric models that are out there in the world and take a lot of time to comprehend and digest and present it in a way that is useful for us as a water agency to understand how it may impact our water supply projections. So one of the digestions that we received just recently was this forecast that there will be this kind of 5 atmospheric rivers coming through in the next 8 to 10 days, and that there's expected to be 8 to 14 inches of total precipitation. That's not just in our area, but going up the west coast up through Washington. More specifically, they looked at some of the modeling and they analyze it, showing that the third atmospheric river that's supposed to hit this weekend is actually going to be centered more over Marin County. So it'll be a little bit lighter than some of the other ARs that come through, but it was interesting to see that that one's centered kind of more over our watershed. So we're expecting a bit more impact from that atmospheric river. And then they also provide a forecast of the precipitation that's expected from some of from some of these ARs. So this is an analysis focusing on the Russian River, just to our north. And they're showing that a few of the different models that project. Of course, all you can expect from models is that not one will be perfectly correct, right? So you take them all together. One showing they're projecting 2.8 inches, another 4.3 inches. All of this, just providing variety in what we can expect over the next week. So just providing some information on the value that we've gained from joining this group has been helpful in knowing what we can expect with our watershed and runoff to our reservoirs.
Do we feed that back into our Sonoma purchases? We tried to.
So as you know, may know, our Sonoma purchases this year are currently shut down at the moment because we're so close to spilling. It does look promising for us to reach the spill capacity, but this kind of information, you could see that it would help you with planning, for example, in a dry year scenario. This is coming. You could get ready to start moving Sonoma water into our system.
Yeah, I'm always amazed when dealing with our ag clients, how sophisticated their weather information is. They really worry about it.
Yeah.
How far out now will they project for us? What?
It depends on the model that you're looking at. Some of these models are usually like 8 to 14 days, the finer scale models. And then if you're looking at the National Weather Service, those ones are, you can look at the seasonal ones. There's a less
Certainty.
less certainty.
The holy grail that they're working on with the Center for Western Weather is the sort of 6-week to 2-3 month window. That's what they call subseasonal to seasonal forecasting, and that's what really would be helpful for agencies like us. So that's the current holy grail that they're trying to pursue.
So all in all, reservoir storage is doing great right now after the rain we've received this year and previous years. Our conservation levels continue to be considerably below drought levels, but also starting to creep back up. And we expect that wet conditions will continue through the coming weeks. So an easy water supply update to give today. I'm happy to take any questions.
Just on our reservoir levels, obviously the rain is having probably most of the impact. Did we also purchase more from Sonoma this year to maintain higher levels going into the rainy season? And is that something, I mean, that must be a tricky
It's extremely
aspect of the management.
We did purchase accelerated levels, but not any more than we did the previous year. There were some operational constraints. They were recoding Castania tank. So it wasn't any faster than last year, I would say.
A number of years ago, we developed a strategy we've called front loading, which instead of staggering the deliveries from Sonoma through the year, we push through the early months, right? So in the summer to maximize and really take as much as we can by now, and we're very close to take our allotment. And that allows us room to take more than our minimum if we need it, if it's dry. So that's kind of our thought currently. We take it early, we front load it, and then we monitor the weather. and we're able to take more than the minimum because we've already taken the minimum and stored it based on the need, based on the weather.
Yeah, your question is a good one. It's a very tricky catch-22 because if you don't do it, you can't make up.
Right. And
And if
it's-
you do it and you watch it $1,100
Right.
take a foot go over the spillway,
right.
it's
Right.
it's not so bad because of the fish. So there's still a benefit to the water, but it's still pretty pricey water going over the spillway. I find that funny, the folks that will tell us that, well, it's free. Sort of. You know, only the incident side of it's free.
First 5,300 feet is not free.
Does Adrian Rodriguez usually call you or do you check in with him?
Of late, courtesy of our recording system,
They don't even need it, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, I think he's been doing a great job and I think we should call him and tell him that. For most of my tenure, I can't remember us being above the fold except a handful of things where they were really excited against us. Now it seems we're almost routinely above the fold. I mean, we're above the fold once a month. It's amazing. I mean, just the other day, there was one about the, I forgot now exactly what it was. Then it cost you, well, it was the reservoir, raising the reservoirs, yeah, increasing the storage. And so I think anyway, we should buy him lunch or something because I think he's been doing a great job. Probably the best I've seen from the IJ. He'll probably appreciate that comment. Okay, any other questions? Public comment?
Yes, we have Mr. Phil Sauter.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the presentation. I really appreciate this chart as it provides a quick insight as to how customers are changing habits over time. And it provides an early indication of customer rebound, if any, from earlier conservation behavior. For example, this chart as of December 2024 suggests there hasn't been much of a rebound for the last 3 years. That's important to know. It also shows clearly that there's still a bump in the summer months as we start using potable water for outdoor landscaping, although that bump is getting somewhat smaller as the years go by. Finally, it doesn't yet show a strong signal that recent rate increases have had a substantial impact on customer usage patterns. For me, and I hope for staff and the board, it would be extremely useful to see 2 additional charts like this. One that shows this information for low and average users, say tier 1 and tier 2 customers, and another that shows this information for high water users, say tier 3 and tier 4 customers. I expect we'd see that the summer bump would be quite different for the 2 groups. And we'd also see how much potential there is for conservation and which user groups we need to reach in order to save 4 million gallons a day sooner than 2045. Also related to Tuesday's discussion of dual noticing for committee meetings, I'd like to say that I've appreciated the input this morning of 4 board members on the issues covered in this meeting and acknowledge that this would not have happened if only 2 board members could speak and the other 3 either sat on their hands or didn't attend at all. I also expect that the detailed and valuable staff presentations may have been truncated if only 2 committee members attended, or perhaps those presentations wouldn't have been made at all. I request that the board move very cautiously before taking these risks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. It brings up an interesting question that I never thought about before. Do the tier 4s use more water all the time? Or is it primarily irrigation? Or do we know? In other words, it wouldn't surprise me that their average usage is higher than the others.
Right.
But the average can be skewed by the summer.
Yeah. I don't have the data to mind to answer your question today.
Do we, with Tiburon having 5,000 meters, are we able to break them out of the tier 4s from the others? I don't know how, I mean, I seem to know a lot of tier fours, but I don't know how many there are.
Yeah, we can identify tier 4 customers for sure by geographic location.
Well, I'm thinking though, Paul, is that I think we could use the AMI data to kind of break this out.
Oh, yeah.
It might be an interesting question to look at a little more carefully. Because it points to a human nature issue, huh? Of do they just always use more water? Are they less concerned about it than others?
Yeah. The use of water it's interesting because if you have a very large property, are you using water efficiently just because you're using, or inefficiently just because you're using more water than the average bear?
That's really the question. Yeah.
So that's kind of where we need to go.
Are you sort of nonchalant about all of it because you use so much for the other?
Right. So that's where kind of informational water budgets, and that's where we want to think about going for, on an AMI customer interface page, you might have a informational water budget. How are you doing? Kind of comparison.
One of my tier 4 poker playing guys who's now died is Skip Berg. And Skip spent $1 million bringing water to his roses during the 70 drought, 76, 75. So, he was willing to spend that kind of money to keep those roses happy. So anyway, okay, thank you very much. Happy holidays to all. And hope you have a great new year. And we'll see you after the change.
Thank you.
Take care.